Welcome back to the latest edition of The Audible, presented by Trader Joe's. I'm Bruce Feldman, joined by my colleague from The Athletic, Stuart Mandel. Ralph Russo is actually traveling back as we do this, back to the East Coast. Stu, we are about 24 hours after the big CFP reveal. Obviously, the big shocker was Notre Dame. Notre Dame has continued to be a big story, and that's pretty much all anybody in our sport is talking about right now, because their AD has gone on a few different platforms and made some interesting comments. There's nobody better for us to have on this show than our colleague, Pete Sampson, who does an amazing job covering Notre Dame. We're going to get into a bunch of things: how the people on the team felt about getting snubbed, what went into the team's decision or the school's decision to not play in any bowl game this year going forward, and also the comments from the AD about what this means with a very tenuous relationship with the ACC. A lot to get into with Pete. But before we get to Pete, I did want to bring something up. Stu, on Monday, you did a column about Notre Dame opting out, but also there's other 5 and 7 teams, and who wants to play in these bowl games now? Who wants to have mayonnaise dumped on them and stand next to the cute Pop Tart mascot? Do you think this is a one-off, or is this a trend that's going in a direction that could change how we view the most wonderful time of the year as it relates to college football?
Personally, as a fan of bowl games, I hope it's a one-off. As a realist, I don't think it is. And this move by Notre Dame kind of sent shockwaves through the whole industry Sunday, realizing what those ramifications could be. Do you remember, Bruce, when Christian McCaffrey became the first?
Yeah, I think it was he and Leonard Fournette, maybe the same. I think it was he and Fournette, maybe the same year, right?
He and Fournette, but like McCaffrey became the poster for it, opting out of the Sun Bowl. I mean, remember how much people criticized athletes those first couple of years. How dare they quit on their team? And very quickly it became totally normalized and had a huge effect on bowl games. Like the fact that they are often missing all the best players. I think there's a fear this could happen, that this set a precedent for other teams in similar positions that either just missed out on the playoff or just, had a disappointing season, thought they'd be in the playoff, saying, oh, this is an option. We don't have to play in the game. Okay, fine. We're out. And you can withstand one of those a season, but if it starts to be many teams, there's not going to be enough to fill all those bowls. And in particular, if it's a school like Notre Dame that you can count on to sell tickets and actually get people to tune into your games, what if it's Georgia next? What if it's, Alabama next? Like when those teams miss the playoff. So it's a big deal. I wrote last year, though, that the Pop Tarts Bowl, the one Notre Dame basically turned down, like almost 7 million people watched that game last year when it was Miami, Iowa State. They remain very popular to viewers, but you're not going to have bowl games if there's no teams to play in them.
Well, what I've looked at them as now is exhibitions. And I'm not saying that they don't matter to people. It's certainly, for years, coaches would talk about how beneficial they were because you got extra practices. In those practices, a lot of times your true freshmen who might be redshirting would get a lot of reps and those kinds of things. But then, as you said, players are opting out. Now, I know there's definitely cases of players opting out, and now they're probably not getting paid their last check for NIL, but they're thinking, hey, I'm going to go into the portal and I can get a head start on some of this. I think it's a complicated situation. My guess is it won't go away, completely really fast. Like you, I love the games at that time of year because it feels like there's always a game on every night, which is a really cool thing. But again, the players are the ones who are staffing them, and some of them don't want to take the risk. And now some of the schools, I feel like Notre Dame, this is a kind of a one-off in terms of the feeling of being snubbed by the CFP, and that is different. But let's get more into it, and let's get to Pete Sampson.
All right, we are pleased to be joined now by Pete Sampson, our colleague who is there in South Bend, who's covered Notre Dame for a long time. And Pete, as you said before we started recording, you probably thought as of yesterday morning you were going to have another 4, 5, 6 weeks of football to cover. But no, Notre Dame season is over. So let's start with the actual being left out of the playoff. What I'm curious about is, I mean, obviously everybody's devastated. They seemed shocked. Did everybody just assume Notre Dame was going to be in there? Was there no thought to, well, they've done this before. They might drop them out at the 11th hour.
There was some thought of that, but I think the way Saturday played out gave Notre Dame like, all right, okay, BYU's out. And then Alabama rushes for -3 yards and gets hammered in the SEC championship game. And I think you look back at past conference game losers, they, I believe, all have dropped without exception. And the other 3 dropped this year, but Alabama proved to be the exception. So I think that was what Notre Dame didn't really see coming, particularly after last week's reveal when Hunter Yurachek talked about Alabama's impressive win at 5-7 Auburn, and how Notre Dame and Alabama, it was like one of the all-time great debates. Some people sided with Notre Dame, some people sided with Alabama. Okay, so it's kind of a 51-49 situation. And then the only thing that happens after that is the SEC title game. So I think that and I think that's Notre Dame's reaction is fueled not just by getting left out, but how they were left out. And Pete Bevacqua, the AD here, talked like, gut punch, rug pulled out from under you. And like plenty of teams have been left out and felt aggrieved by it. But I struggle to come up with an example like Notre Dame, where you were in the whole time. You were told that head-to-head sort of mattered, but didn't really. And then you've got the Alabama situation on top of it. So that's why it all made it pretty difficult for Notre Dame to stomach as a football program.
I think we all agree that, and I feel like I've been saying this for a while, the dumbest thing of the CFP in a litany of stupidity is that Tuesday reveal show. The expression, nobody wants this, nobody needs this. And it actually does a disservice to the college football playoff and to the sport. People can sit there, and we argued about this, Stu and I did, and maybe Ralph to some degree, about the throwing out the head-to-head over Notre Dame versus Miami. But the thing I don't think anybody disagreed with was like, okay, Notre Dame has gotten a lot better over the course of the year. Well, here you're sitting here with Alabama, looked really bad in the opener, had a dud performance against a team in Florida State that did not turn out to be good at all. And then they sputtered down the stretch, right? They lost at home to Oklahoma. They, as you said, and I think we both agree, it was kind of a really bad performance in the Iron Bowl, found a way to win, sneak out of there with a win, and then got destroyed in the SEC title game, right? It wasn't even close, right? They could have gotten shut out. They didn't, but they still lost by 3 touchdowns. When you watch the reveal show, just from your own perspective of covering Notre Dame for a long time, did you think your audience, the Notre Dame fan base, and the people inside Notre Dame felt like this was more of an issue of kind of like the CFP itself, or was it more of a structure of, oh, this is really the ACC who we have this partnership with, but it's not it's kind of this clunky thing where they're not in with football, but they play some teams, and they felt like the ACC stabbed them in the back? Or is it more, hey, the CFP right up to, I think ESPN positioned this as still being a Miami versus Notre Dame thing, as opposed to a Notre Dame versus Alabama thing?
It's all of the above, honestly. It's like I go back to watching the Big 12 championship game, and ESPN flashed a graphic. It was what would a Texas Tech win mean? And it included Texas Tech in, and there's one remaining at-large spot to be figured out among Notre Dame, Miami, and BYU. Like the idea of Alabama dropping out wasn't even considered. So I think that's pretty difficult for Notre Dame to understand. I think the ACC part of it, Pete Bevacqua used the term permanent damage to that relationship based on the way the conference behaved. I understand the ACC stumping for Miami, but the way they went about it was Miami, yes, Notre Dame, no, like team A, team B. And when there are other teams under consideration, and the committee just they spelled that out for you. Like, we're comparing Miami and Notre Dame and Alabama and BYU. I think for the conference to behave the way that it did rubbed a lot of people around here the wrong way.
For clarity's sake, just to I saw the stuff about how much the ACC network reran the old was it? But beyond that, was there a lot more about what the ACC did or didn't do? Like, I'll be honest, I didn't. Beyond some of that, I saw, how often they re-aired that in the programming, but I didn't know if there was other things that we need to kind of spotlight here too.
The ACC football account had tweeted out a lot of side by some comparisons with Notre Dame and Miami, and the idea that Miami was the only choice there, and that's I get Miami doing it, but I think the conference doing it was a different sort of set of circumstances there, and I think Notre Dame looks at it as look, we've been a good business partner with you. If you want to argue for Miami over Alabama, that's fine. Go for it. But I think Notre Dame expected more of a willing business partner from the league than what they got there. And that I think leaves, I don't know what Notre Dame's options are there long term. It's not like they can just quit the ACC tomorrow and go to the Big East or join the Big Ten. But I think that I take Bevacqua at his word. When you use the word permanent, that's what it means. It's a permanent change in that relationship.
Yeah, I think probably, and I'm not defending the ACC here. I know they were put in a pretty awkward situation, but they, like the rest of us, spent 3 weeks, probably or more, getting sucked into this head-to-head thing, right? And this podcast and everywhere. How can they ignore the head-to-head? Head-to-head should matter. Da 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 da. And you're right, there wasn't much talk at any point of well, maybe instead of focusing on those two, what's Alabama doing here? Yeah. That was never even a thought until the second half of the SEC championship. Suddenly it was oh, you mean there's a world where maybe they should be the ones that don't make it? So I think that's probably what the ACC got sucked into, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's part of it. And I think Notre Dame is, I think rightly ticked off that look, you had all off season to come up with your tiebreakers to set your conference championship game. And what you came up with gave us Virginia and Duke. That. There was no reason that this couldn't have been a Notre Dame and Miami situation, but the ACC had to have a lot more foresight, or a little more foresight, to understand okay, how do we put the league in the best position and one of our partners in the best position to make the playoff? And they absolutely failed to do that.
Are you suggesting that they could have pivoted to a rematch in the ACC title game though?
No, it's more of a commentary on a year ago when you're figuring out, okay, what are our tiebreakers? What are our protocols for setting the ACC championship game? Or how do we schedule our league games? You knew Miami was going to be good. So take care of them in a way that you're sort of, I realize you can't put them in over Virginia, but the fact that there was a set of tiebreakers in place where Duke got it over Miami, I think is insane.
It is insane.
That's something the league has to take a hard look at. Because if I was Miami, I would be ticked off at that. Forget Notre Dame for a minute.
I think the connection you're drawing, right, is if Miami had played in and won the ACC championship game, then they're in. Then that's one more at-large spot available for Notre Dame.
But
right?
that's the James Madison spot. Then,
right.
Though.
I mean,
Miami would have had the James Madison spot.
What playoff do we want to see? Do we want to see Notre Dame in the playoff, or do we want to see James Madison in the playoff?
But maybe I'm overthinking the obvious here, but Miami gets the James Madison spot. Alabama's still in.
Well, no, because then Miami would get James
Miami's
Madison
not an at-large team anymore.
Opening up one more at-large bid.
I get it.
Then Notre Dame makes it.
Yeah, I'm just saying it's it came to this thing where it just shouldn't have gotten to this point with the ACC. And look, we've talked about this on our podcast for a while. The ACC leadership has really missed the boat on this. I think coming out of the announcement show 24 hours ago from where we're taping, I felt like Notre Dame was a very sympathetic figure to this. I said it. I think and look, I was one of the ones who was the most stunned that they could overlook the head-to-head with two exact records the same, and they do this dopey thing where it's well, we can't, unless they're exactly next to each other, we can't even fathom that they could be the same things. I was just it's just so preposterous. And then I get why Notre Dame didn't want to play in a bowl game. I've seen other people, and my colleague at Fox, Brady Quinn, who's obviously was a great player there, was Yeah, we're not going to prop up your ratings, ESPN. You put on that dog and pony show. You trot it
Okay,
out.
I gotta stop that.
No,
right
you
there.
no, you don't have to stop.
Because I've been getting a lot of that in the comments too, and so I want to hear it from Pete.
Yeah,
No,
Pete Bevacqua made this decision. Right?
Let me finish my
Yeah.
point, Stu, before you get your excited. All right, so here's where I'm going with this. I felt like Notre Dame was a very sympathetic figure to a lot of folks in college football, and then it was, hey, we're not playing in the bowl game. And I honestly don't have a problem with that at all. I understand it and everything else. And I'm curious to hear from you. Was it the player's decision or how involved, like what went behind that decision? But the other thing is, so Pete Bevacqua, the AD, then goes, speaks to Yahoo and has some strong comments and also lets out that there's this provision that's going to be in the CFP next year that would have protected Notre Dame this year, but also gives Notre Dame is certainly preferential treatment. That's not going to sit well with everybody. And then he goes on Dan Patrick the next morning and talks about this Notre Dame ACC relationship, which, let's be honest, I mean, I think they're trying to have their cake and eat it too with that. They're not a football member. I get it, you're a partner, but you're not the same as what the rest of the league is. So I don't know. I don't think they care, but are they coming out of this as almost going from somebody people look sympathetic to, do you think, to somebody people are going to put the black hat on again?
I think that is definitely more of a black hat move now. I mean, it's funny thinking back a year ago, we were all writing is Notre Dame likable now? And that lasted about 12 months. So in terms of the opt-out, very player-driven. Marcus Freeman is very much like a player feedback type coach. And if you're going to take feedback from your players, you actually have to take the feedback and act on it. And the players did not want to play in the game, felt like they were going to have opt-outs beyond your Jeremiah Loves. I don't think anyone would begrudge Jeremiah Love for not playing the Pop Tarts Bowl, but I think it would have gone much deeper than that. I don't know if it's the right decision, if it's the wrong decision. I've talked to a bunch of former players about it, Brady Quinn among them. I think it's overwhelmingly, I get it. I wouldn't have wanted to play in that game either after the way that, they had the rug pulled out from them, but it's not unanimous. So I don't know if Notre Dame comes out of this they don't look like a sympathetic figure anymore. I agree with you on that. I don't think it's fair to have the play like a champion sign replaced as take your ball and go home or quit when it gets hard, because I don't think that's accurate either. But it's a tough spot. I would respect it most if the decision not to play in the bowl was essentially a protest vote about how the program was kind of dragged through this process. I mean, the committee reduced Notre Dame to a plot twist in a TV show. You can't treat people that way and then expect them to say, thank you, please, may I eat a cinnamon swirl Pop-Tart on live television. That, the world doesn't work that way, and there's got to be consequences for it. And this is one of those consequences.
We're going to take a break and we will be right back. Chris Manini wrote a column, criticizing Notre Dame for opting out. And man, you have a lot of readers on this site, Pete, on The Athletic. They just took over that comment section, and they apparently had formed this collective, almost stated as fact that this was why would we give ESPN the ratings and the revenue from us playing in the Pop Tarts Bowl after what they did to us? And of course, this furthers the conspiracy theory that's already exists, that it's not Ivan Maisel and Randall McDaniel and Jeff Long who picked the teams. It's Jimmy Pitaro and Burke Magnus, and they've got to protect the SEC. And my thing would be, if ESPN wanted to juice their ratings, wouldn't they insist Notre Dame be in the playoff?
Oh yeah,
instead of Miami.
I'm not a big.
This is not what this is about.
Theory. Yeah, I'm not I get it as a byproduct. It's kind of a middle finger protest that way, but I think it's much more of hey, you pulled the rug out from under us. You reduced us to a plot twist. And
I don't think, by the way, this isn't, but Stu, I think you're overlooking something. This isn't a Miami versus Notre Dame thing. This is Notre Dame versus the SEC and Alabama. Right. I think you have to keep it framed as that. This is who is ESPN's biggest partner in this?
But ESPN doesn't pick the teams as much as people would love to think that.
No,
they don't pick the teams. They televise that stupid show.
I know, but there's a lot of pieces that go into this. And I'm saying the last person I think anybody wants to tick off there is Greg Sankey. Greg Sankey went on TV and said he thought there should be 17 SEC teams in before. By the way, who's the spokesman for the CFP?
An SEC athletic director.
Yeah,
no, I get it.
There you go.
Everything that happened just furthers that conspiracy theory. But in terms of Notre Dame's decision, it sounds like what you're saying is like Pete Bevacqua didn't like march to Bristol and say, "Screw you guys,
no,
we're not playing in your bowl."
Absolutely,
the players were devastated,
and I would contend that if those ranking shows did not exist, and on Sunday it popped up and Notre Dame was the first team out, Notre Dame would be playing in a bowl game. I think it was how it happened had more to do with the decision than what the decision actually was.
Because the actual decision is defensible, right? At the end of the day, they didn't have a great resume. And so if nobody ever knew what the rankings were before, then that's... What about also, though, I mean, you just got this news and then, ESPN and the Bulls want to put out their lineup as soon as possible. You have to commit within probably an hour. Like if they had 24 hours to cool down, do you think they'd be in a bowl?
I think it might have taken more than 24 hours, but I get what you're saying. I think if they could have decided a week later, maybe they would have come to a different decision. But this is the world that the bowl system and ESPN has set up where you got to decide right away because apparently we all need to know who's playing in Orlando on December 27th, 3 weeks in advance. So I think it put Notre Dame in a terrible situation. And I can understand kind of more of an emotional decision being made there. I do wonder, long term, if they're going to look back at this and be like, God, I wish we had played one more game. But I think it goes back to like the way this unfolded over the last 2 weeks was bigger than what like the actual final decision. That I think is Notre Dame's biggest complaint here. And I think they're absolutely justified in that regard.
One of the things that's really frustrating out of this weekend is also, Pete, Stu, and I talked about this offline a little this morning, is that we've on this show have been hammering the idea of having this stupid Tuesday night show for a long time. And it's only become more preposterous this year because they had the worst chairman, spokesperson they've ever had. They couldn't have picked a worse person up there, to be honest. So now we're sitting there and we're finding out, oh no, it's in the contract. ESPN and the CFP need these 5 shows before the ultimate rankings that matter. And you're sitting there going, nobody needs this. It's hurting the sport. It is actually hurting college football to have this dumbass show on. I don't know if the workaround for them is to say, hey, look, we're going to send Hunter Yurachek up to do 5 first takes in November and they can ask him whatever they want. Or he can go to the White Birch in Bristol if it still exists and sit down and talk to people in Bristol about it and do like town halls. But if there's bad rules that that the sport realizes that are a health risk, they can change them. They don't need to be on the calendar. In the case of this, I don't know how they go forward this year and say, oh yeah, we need to keep doing that show on Tuesday nights that we shoehorn in between some college basketball game or a MAC game. The most prominent person at ESPN right now, Kirk Herbstreit, even this weekend came out and was like, yeah, basically said the show sucks. He begged off
it. He used to be on that. He doesn't show up on it. He
said it was misleading and a mistake to do those shows.
Well, he's 1,000% right.
I respect the hell out of Kirk for saying that because I don't think anybody could do a good job with what they're asking the committee chair to do, but I can tell you someone who did an atrocious job. And like I thought Hunter Yurachek just with the Alabama, they were up 17-0 at Auburn. That was really impressive to us. And we're like, well, what happened the rest of the game? Well, but I told you they were up 17-0. It wasn't that impressive. It never added up. I mean, he referenced Notre Dame's 70-7 win over Syracuse. Well, like margin of victory above 24 points isn't supposed to really matter. So like, why is that coming up? it felt like they made it up as they went along. Bruce, I know you kind of rage tweeted last week, and I thought it was pretty funny when you did it. And I was like, actually, Bruce was kind of ahead of the curve on this.
Well, I'll tell you another thing Bruce was ahead of the curve on. So he reveals on that, teleconference, actually, I think on the ESPN show, on the teleconference, that just in the last week at the 11th hour, he told the committee members to rewatch the Miami Notre Dame game from week 1.
I guess they could have found it on the ACC network. It was on many times.
So this is going to sound exactly like what Bruce had been saying for weeks in, the head-to-head thing. So we asked him what were some of the takeaways. Really how Miami's defense dominated Notre Dame's running game, where Notre Dame had really been for the rest of the season. Their running game with that dual threat they had there at running back dominated most of the other teams they played, but Notre Dame's star running back was held to 33 yards in that game.
What the hell were they doing?
They just found that out in the last week.
What are, I don't know what this is. I've spent, my family spent some time a couple of years ago when our kids were a little younger at that very Gaylord Hotel at that time of year. And they do like a really cool, like Christmas ice thing. It's great for little kids.
It's like a playground.
Is when those guys check their hats on that stupid coat thing, is that what they do? They sit there and go around the Gaylord and just kind of look around and at all the Winter Wonderland stuff? Like, that's the stuff. Again, this wasn't like this was a game between Notre Dame and a Sunbelt team. Like, I don't know why these conversations were not had. And another problem with this is, like, Stu, I know, and believe me, I'm not calling you out for this, but like, I know you've referenced stuff in the past of like, oh yeah, in the last 7 years, a version of the CFP committee has done this or do that. And we always do that, right? And I get why we do it, but it's a different committee every year. As Pete said, and we've said a lot, they make it up as they go along. There's going to be a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, people are going to be digging up old Hunter Yurachek gems to try to make their case, and they're going to just be proven wrong. Yeah,
no, it's true. Why do I keep thinking there's any sort of like reliable precedent to, like what Pete said at the beginning about historically conference championship. If you lose your conference championship game by 2 touchdowns or more, you drop 2 or 3 spots at least, but not Alabama.
You could lose on a game-winning field goal against Clemson and drop 2 spots. You could lose in overtime against Duke and drop 2 spots.
But there was an unwritten rule that we didn't know about, that if you beat the team the first time, like Alabama did, then it doesn't count. BYU didn't beat Texas Tech the first time, so they do drop.
It became beating Georgia the first time was that much more impressive because, like, did you see Georgia in the SEC championship game? They're incredible. So I'm sort of like, I'm both mad and disappointed in myself that I thought listening to the Tuesday shows was a good use of my time. It was not, because it just turned out to be just this collection of misleading quotes and takes from the committee about, what they saw. And then they just made it up as they went along, and they made it up on Sunday. That just happened to be the last time they were going to make it up for this year.
We will be right back after a quick break. All right, Pete, I'll let you go on this. It's the question you've answered a million times over the last 20 years, but yet again, it comes up. Is this the thing that forces Notre Dame to have to join a conference?
No, because you're going to join the ACC, and like how well has that worked out for Duke? How well did playing in the Big 12 championship game work out for BYU? Like, Notre Dame has problems to solve. I don't absolve Notre Dame for the position that they're in right now, but joining a conference, especially like considering the state of conference, whether the Big 10, SEC, Big 12, ACC, like, I don't think there's anything attractive about that for if you're Notre Dame. So I think Notre Dame would rather be in control of as much as it can be in control of. And I think they look at, the state of the ACC right now. That's just not a league that you want to be affiliated with any more than you already are.
Can I ask you one thing on this, Pete? Just because, like, I had this discussion with not Stu, but other people I know pretty well about, including some Notre Dame grads I'm friends with, is the positioning of Marcus, especially, I feel like has made Notre Dame likable to a lot of people who didn't used to like Notre Dame. Right?
Oh, they used to be.
Yeah.
No. I don't think
that passed.
Let me pull back on this though. This is not Marcus. I think it's the AD now who has, and I'm not like nitpicking this thing, but like, it was a Sunday comments to Yahoo. It was the Monday to Dan Patrick. Who knows what he's going to say on Tuesday at his press conference. I'm not saying, I don't think Marcus is coming out as a villain in any of this. He's the head coach of a team. I'm not sure anybody who felt a way about him is going to change their opinion on him 24 hours later. As Notre Dame folks, how do you think they feel about, I don't want to say, because it's always been kind of a different vibe about Notre Dame typically than the rest of college football. They've kind of liked the special treatment or whatever. I'm not saying they've always had the black hat necessarily, but it's a different positioning. How do you think this goes going forward for that huge fan base?
Mostly righteous indignation. I think we'll probably carry the day moving forward around here. I think that the fan base probably looks at this like, we got screwed. What can we do to take it out on everyone that screwed us moving forward? And I think, next year, Notre Dame's internally felt like next year's roster was one that was like built to do it, to go all the way. So that will be part of it. They should be very good next year. But I think that it will be unfortunate. Like, I'm not a huge fan of conspiracy theories, but this is going to spawn 1,000 of them. And I think Notre Dame's going to just continue to look for ways that they're being aggrieved or screwed or passed over. So yeah, I'd say like righteous indignation is probably the prevailing sentiment right now. And I think it's going to stay that way for a very long time.
All right. As always, read Pete Sampson. He's as good as there is, especially on Notre Dame, and he's very reasonable, which doesn't always happen this day and age. So, Pete, thank you for sharing some time with us. Hopefully you have a more relaxing Christmas time this year.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Pete. All right, guys, we will be back on Thursday. Ralph will be back. We will start to look ahead to the Heisman on Saturday, the Army-Navy game, the LA Bowl, plenty of things to talk about. And of course, it's mailbag episodes. So send your questions to theaudiblepod@gmail.com, and we will see you then.